Yeah, because like when we think of like the story of Esther or the story of Ruth, or we think of the other romanticized versions of any story, any biblical story, we're
Mhm.
always like, oh man, it's so cool to find a Boaz, and do Boaz things. Like, what does that even mean? It's like, oh, I'm a Proverb 31 woman and blah blah blah. I'm like, do you even know what that means? Or do you just hear it as a child and you're like, I want to do that? Like, you know what I'm saying? So like there's a lot of Sunday school stories that we were told,
Yeah.
like a very surfacey part of it, and then like you read it, you're like, oh, that had nothing to do with nothing. It had something to do with this versus that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. But I think there's a part of, and I'm gonna go on a rant here. There's a part of Christianity that often wants to assimilate to the culture climate of like what society deems as love or not love.
Yeah.
And so we try to find context clues or stories that align with our own version of what love is, and we say, oh, it's such a beautiful love story. It's like, no, bro, Ruth and Boaz, dog, like, hey, that had nothing to do with love. That was all survival.
Mhm.
But it's like, no, but Boaz is like, no, 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 no. Boaz was obligated by the law to do what he did.
Mhm.
He couldn't refuse, or else he wouldn't be seen as a law-abiding citizen. Law, he was a great man, a wealthy man, but was also, by the law, and by law he had to take, me and Ruth in that way. Um, and so yeah, but we've romanticized it and said, oh, you gotta find your Boaz. So you gotta find your second cousin who's way, way, way older than you. It's like, what does that mean?
Well, I guess in some things maybe that's what makes stories attractive because in reaching out to you and wanting to do the podcast, I was thinking along these ideas of like, hey, let's catch up like we usually do, and but there's the like the Christian story as we've known it, kind of growing up with it, or as you read it in the Bible, which is what I've been trying to do more recently and trying to understand like, okay, what's the context of this like as an adult, or like where did the story come from? What's it based around? And learning to read things within context without like the pretty coloring that goes with it. It's like, oh, okay, like there's more reality to it. There's more gravity to it. And I guess for me it's like on the one hand it can be everything, or it's called to be everything, where it's like, okay, you stake your life on this like many people did before, and it's something that you live and die for. And the point I was kind of getting at with hysteria is like, um on the one end what was fringe before almost seems to be like popular now, and everybody that has a platform on YouTube or different things is like, Christians are being persecuted. And it's like, on the one hand, I can kind of see that. Like people talk about, oh, they're taking God out of this or they're taking God out of that. But at the same time, I'm like, are, are we just like another group of professional victims where it's like, okay, like you're, um, like this is the fun thing to say, but like a guilty pleasure of mine has been, I'll go back from time to time. If I'm feeling bad about myself, I'll watch something about, what do you call it? Televangelists, like
Mhm.
the scam artists and different things like that, or they'll call it
Let
like,
me put my hands on you and whip my coat on you and
right.
put you in a
So it's like you
space.
got people
Like,
falling out and different things like that. And it's like it's it's um in the US, it seems like a lot of it's in the US, but you'll see it in a lot of like African teachings, African, like the big get-togethers and things like that. And it's like the same patterns over and over, and you kind of get upset on the one hand, where somebody might be like, that's what they see as Christianity. It's like, okay, you got these people out here taking advantage of the poor, lining their pockets, multi-level marketing in ways to be like, okay, well, if you want to be healed, you just got to send me your tide. You just got to send me a little bit. And it's
Listen,
on
I got this water for sale, bro. Let me tell
stop,
you.
stop it. But
I'm
it's
telling
like,
you right now, that is healing water.
stop.
And the way that God made it,
Oh
it
my.
kept me from thirst all day.
But
I
it's like
tell you,
if you see enough of that, for me, like the knee-jerk reaction has always been to like, okay, let me watch this and like, I mean, it's there's nothing wrong maybe with like having your guilty pleasure because everybody has what they enjoy,
right,
but it's one of those things where it's like it's convenient on the one hand to be like, oh, let me just blame them and oh, like let's line up this charismatic person dressed up however, and it's like, oh, like there's just so many different things. I think one of the guys was uh maybe I don't even remember his name, but it's one of these guys that was real charismatic. He like spit in his hand and wiped it in his brother's face or something like that.
oh, what's his
And
name? Dude, young pastor dude.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
like I was thinking of his name, but then I was like, maybe it's best if I don't remember, but I'm sure somebody will
everybody knows
remember.
who that man is.
But
No.
but it's like you have people that you're so charismatic in a way, and it's like you get away with that over and over. And then on the one hand, it's like, well, obviously you can become resentful, as I have in the past, and like kind of flip the switch on and on. It's like, oh, F that person, forget that person. It's like
Right.
throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it's like, on the other hand, you can either call it out or you can start learning for yourself. Okay, what's really going on? What's the story really about? Let me dig into it. Or it could be like, oh, I don't want to study Hebrew. I don't want to go through all these different versions. But for me personally, it's just one of those things where I was like, okay, if this hysteria is coming into my field of view to where it's like, oh, this has my attention, it's like maybe I can steer away from the distraction and actually educate myself in a way, like do research that's going to take time and attention and things like that. Or I mean, I can kind of just go with the flow, like mind my own business, not really be worried about it. It's not like I'm just getting on here to make oh, I'm going to call out this person. It's like, that's not really my style, but it is fun to talk about. And
But, okay, so here's the thing, bro. Like, I truly believe that we also, as much as we want to say we live in cancel culture, we also live in call out culture and
mhm,
um, cultures of extremes.
yeah,
But, like, there there is a very professionalized victimhood. There's a very professionalized way of selling a point,
mhm,
but also professional attention getting, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and often enough that we have known through in the last five or 10 years that attention is where money is. So
mhm,
it's like if we can get as many eyes on a topic, as negative or positive it could be, but we've also known that positive subjects don't garner as much attention. The negativity, though, oh my gosh, it will make you money.
right,
So it's
right,
like you're on a platform, whatever platform is like the more negative perspective you have or opinion that you have that is kind of skewed in a negative way
mhm,
or in the extreme way, the more attention you're gonna get, the more agitation you're gonna. So the more agitation you can cause, the better your viewership is. And so um, it's some people, you know, go to even in a biblical sense, it's like there's provocative teachings that create internal agitation, and you
mhm,
can say, yeah, I'm going to align with this or I'm not going to align with this. But then also when people create an identity around something controversial, anytime you say anything contradicting to that perspective, they take it personal, as a personal attack, and they get offended. It's like, I don't even know you from Adam. I'm just trying to say that this point that you've made has no context to this.
right,
Like, great. It's like if we're in a conversation about two plus two is four,
yeah,
you and I are talking about the this equation specifically. Two plus two is four.
mhm,
somebody comes in and says, "Well, did you know that 3 plus 1 it also equals 4?" I'm gonna say, "Great answer, wrong context." Like we weren't talking about 3 plus 1, brother. We were talking about 2 plus 2 and how we get 4.
Mhm.
Hey, but it's like anytime that there's a unique perspective or a singular perspective, there's always going to be people who are like, "Oh no, there's can't possibly just be that." Yeah, we know it's not just that. There's other perspectives, and so it's like people create an identity over 2 plus 2 and can't see it any way other than the only way to get 4 is by taking 2 and plussing 2.
Yeah.
Not 5 minus 1, not 3 plus 1. It's the only way to get 4 is 2 plus 2. And it's like, oh, okay, so you've made your bed and you're standing on that hill of 2 plus 2 is 4. And the only way to get 4 is just using that equation. Okay, cool. I just know that 3 plus 1 is 4 too. And 5 minus 1 is 4. But hey, for you, 2 plus 2 is what it is. So it's like, cool. Um, but all to your point is like we have taken certain things way out of context and trying to bring them into a context that doesn't apply to it. Just because it's the right answer doesn't mean that it's the right question for that answer. Like wrong question, right answer type of ordeal. Um, but I don't know. I think we've been doing that as long as humans been humaning.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, mm. But again, it's everybody has their own perspective,
Yeah.
and I say, does it work for you? If the answer is yes, okay. Does it hurt anybody and harm anybody in any shape, way, or form? The answer is no. Okay, cool. Then I'm right. Or does it help you feel closer to the Most High, to God, to your Creator? That does it do that for you? And if it does, and that's what you want to use as a vehicle, great. Go off, as they say. Um, but I like for me, I'm like,
I mean,
it's like, you know,
I think I kind of get what you're saying. In some ways, I feel like some things when you look at them, it seems like okay, anything can turn into a slippery slope. But then, obviously, to a point you made, like the perspective that you have kind of informs what you do or how you carry on. And in some ways, it seems like okay, that's not really significant. Like, hey, if it doesn't hurt anybody, just do whatever makes you feel good, type of thing. And I
right.
think in some regards maybe that applies, and then other times it just feels like okay. When I kind of reflect it back to me, it's like it's much easier to follow people than to like dig down in something and be
Oh
like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
what is it that I understand about this? Because it's if you look at how many opinions or things just kind of splinter off in different directions, it's like okay, it's not impossible to think that okay, if someone speaks really well or they started off with the right intentions, quote unquote, they get a little power hungry and then it's like, okay, you can't tell me nothing different. And it's like that seems like kind of like the default. Like why would you I don't know if narcissistic is the word or if that's like the new buzzword this year or
I
something
mean,
or
it's in
like
there. It might
within
be a new it might be a buzzword, but it still applies.
right. It's like there I guess there's like there are people that applies to, and I guess um you only have attention for like so many things. Like so whoever is in like front and center right now, if it's hey, this is the person you should follow, this is the person you should pay attention to, it's like yeah, it kind of goes with it. And I guess what I'm trying to say, like long story short, is that um just because you're able to change your opinion on something or on a topic, you shouldn't feel bad about, I guess, feel bad or just like condemn your life to be like, oh, I was such a like a crap person because I
Oh,
thought this,
because I
or
thought
like
that way. Yeah, no.
right. But it's weird when you kind of step back and you just see people go on these like tribal extremes where it's like it's all one way or it's all another way, and it's like it's either you're going left, left, right, left, right, left, right. Like nobody's um like no one really talks about like the nuance. Or I guess some people do, but it's like obviously you can tell what uh what's the next latest thing that has everybody's attention, even if you can look at a story and just be like, okay, well, this is BS because of this bias, or this is BS because of that bias. And like you kind of looking at the two things and it's like, okay, is it really going to be worth my time to
to
tell
even vet.
anybody else about that? Because it's
Yeah.
like, who cares? Like people are entertained and it's like, hey, like it is harm, like some things do harm people, obviously. People being taken advantage of, or someone thinking, hey, um, here's a get rich quick here's a get rich quick screen scheme, and
I,
it's like
I know what you're saying.
and it's like just seeing people caught up in that over and over is like some people you kind of feel bad for, but then other times it's like if it's the same person kind of falling for the same schemes, it's like I can't keep feeling bad for
Right.
you if you keep falling
If
for the
you keep
same things
literally,
over and over.
but there's some people who are mentally drawn to extremes, and
That's yeah, that's true.
some people who are also mentally um, always looking for a tribe to belong to,
Hmm.
acceptance. And when they find it and they stick to it and align with that, and that's the tribe that accepts them,
Hmm.
okay, cool. Like this is literally um being in the military was kind of like this. There there were some people who joined because their family lineage, was like, yeah, my granddaddy fought in World War II. My uncles and dad fought in Vietnam, and now I'm also in the military because it's what my family does.
Yeah.
Great, congratulations, you're following your legacy. Okay, okay, cool. There's some people who are like, yeah, the military is cool, but that's not my life. Like I have a whole entire identity outside of the military, and some people are like, well, how could you? How could you not love your country like I do? It's like, well, everybody's get treated differently. So
What you mean by that?
uh, no. It's like, well, I love this country, and I'm willing to fight for it, provided that it also pays me correctly, and it also gives me the benefits of it. So it's like everybody has their thing about joining the military, but there are some people who you look at you like, oh man, yeah, you are definitely about that life. Like like, oh, you're every every leader's like dream soldier, dream marine, or whatever it says. Like, okay, because you do what you're told and how you're told, and you don't ask no questions. Like,
Yeah.
great. And these people have been in for 20 some odd years, and then and they still do that. They obey orders without no question. And then you got the people who are like, that doesn't sound correct. Let me double check what you're asking me to do,
Yeah.
and if it's within alignments of my job and or you know the regulations that I'm given. Oh yeah, 100%. But some people don't really fully know or understand it, so they just kind of just do it. So it's like you see these extremes in this profession that is supposed to be very extreme and very, like even in that it has its own extremes. But again, it's not that their ideas are better than mine or worse than mine. It's just that's the lens that they see themselves in. That's the lens that they see life through, and that's the lens that informs their next steps. So I think we do have, if you know yourself well enough and you know that you have an addictive personality, it's like that once you binge watch one thing, oh, it's gonna spiral and go into this one extreme. But
Mhm.
if you don't know that, you're gonna think like, oh man, I was an idiot for thinking that. But if you know yourself enough to also have grace for yourself in your own knowledge of your addictive personality type, if you will, then like, yeah, I'm probably gonna do this and binge this for the next 3 months, and I'm probably gonna be done with that in 3 months, and that's okay because this is what also allows me to understand, like, you know, you know yourself well enough to know that, hey, for right now, this is what I'm doing. I'm
Yeah.
binging, and I'll get over it. It's not my life. It's not my identity. But those who, again, stick their identity to that thing that they're binging, anything contradicting to that is like, oh my gosh, how can you not? And you see the two camps
Yeah.
of fans. But I also think there's like fandom that comes with the extremes. There's like Marvel fans, there's DC fans, there's like Captain America is not better than Batman and Superman, and it's like, well, Star Wars and Star Trek is like, wait, wrong conversation, but cool. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like there's like extreme camps of everybody, and it's like, again, hey, you grew up reading these comics, you grew up hearing these stories, and you're going to align with this. But if you know that they're both good, or if you know that they're both have validity to them and they have their own storyline, and their storyline sometimes cross and steal from each other, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I see the full picture, so I can better walk through life knowing I was like, I see you, Superman. I see you, Captain America. Okay, Justice League, Avengers. Hello, same thing. Just different scenario, but again,
Yeah.
it's opinions, and that's okay.
I think I see what you're saying because on the one hand, I was thinking if it's like it definitely feels more comfortable being on a side or being on what feels like the winning side, so to
Mm,
speak. And it's like I don't know if it's a part of just growing up where you're like, okay, well, I don't have to stay in this clique in order to belong or like to feel like I know something because on the one hand, it like having that community element definitely feels like you're part of something that's a little bit bigger than yourself or you have something that you can contribute to versus like if you're an outsider, if you don't really care, you can kind of like do your own thing, no one bothers you. But then it's nice when you can kind of participate in things, but for me recently it feels like maybe going from being so like doing something for so many years and then being able to pull back and be like, okay, well, now I need to start something over, so to speak. But then at the same time, it's like, well, maybe you start something over by obviously doing something you're already interested in. So it's like if it's a sport or it's something that helps you communicate with other people to where you don't like self isolate. And then before long, you're like, okay, the only ideas that kind of matter are what's going through your head. And it's like, I don't know. Like I like myself, but I also like to have a little bit distance from myself. So that's where it's nice to like chime in with like, okay, let's get a little bit of ridiculousness here or there.
right.
Let's get that in. And it's like, okay, maybe that's enough of that. I can close that book or turn that off and like just go to sleep, not think about anything. But it's is that something you've thought of or that's crossed your mind? Because like
Oh
on the
yeah.
one hand, I have like the knee jerk reaction to um, be contrarian, where it's like somebody would say, uh, it feels like there's one way to do things.
Mhm.
And it's like, if you're not doing it this way, you're doing it wrong. And you've got to do everything to get back like in line. But sometimes it's like, when it comes to even like cleaning up, it's, you want things to be like neat, nice, and tidy. And then after a while, it's like, maybe you go out of your way to like just break something to be like, no, I've got to I've either got to break something or I've got to keep something like I've got to work to have something maintained to where it's like I can enjoy that when I look at it. And it's not just like something that you put like in a glass box or a porcelain shelf that you like you never look at. Like some things that like you've got in your background, they're nice ornaments, they're nice reminders, but like everything isn't that. Otherwise it's like nothing kind of has meaning.
Right. No. So That's actually pretty funny that you would say that because when when I was in the military and I went from the Marine Corps to the Army, it was two different cultures.
Mhm.
Same, same military,
Yeah.
but two completely different branches, two completely different cultures. And you would think from the outside, well, you're in the military, everything should be the same. Well, no, it's not. It's
Mhm.
there's cultures, subcultures, and things that align with that. And going from the Marine Corps to the Army, there was a way that I knew how to operate, how to speak, how to work, how to lead, and just how to just live life. When I joined the Army, things were different, not bad, not good, just different,
Mhm.
and having to change that way, having to literally break that porcelain perspective of life in the military was contrary. Like there's a lot of things that I did that I didn't like just because they were contrary, not because they were bad or not because they were hard. They were just
Mhm.
contrary to how I was used to operating. Um,
You talking about having to press your pants every time you gotta
no,
stand at attention.
well, no, it was just like the rules and regulations, but also how to treat people.
Mhm.
Coming from the Marine Corps, I had one way of speech,
Mhm.
one very direct and harsh way of talking. Again, not bad, not good, just different. Joining the Army was more so like, hey, you can't talk to people like that. I was like, oh, okay. I guess I can't talk to people. I can't, you know, say whatever I want to say like that because it's a little, it's a little too harsh. And so it's like, oh, my immediate response was like, well, that's because that person's weak. And I'm like, well, let me change that. And it's
Mhm.
not because they're weak, it's just because they're different. That's not how they grew up in the military being talked to. So maybe me talking to them like that isn't the most conducive way for them to operate. Okay, cool, great. Um, Now some people would venture out to say like, oh no, that person's weak for not being able to take a little bit of yelling.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, it's not their bread and butter. Not you and I think we've talked about this. Like you don't use a hammer to fix everything,
Right,
or you
right.
end up with more holes in the wall than you're fixing. Um, and so it's like, okay, let me figure out different ways to operate. And so just like how you said, it's like it's a lot easier to follow. It's a lot easier to not do your due diligence and learn about something. It's a lot easier to be taken advantage of when you haven't done your own due diligence
Mhm.
to to understand why you're doing something. But it does require a level of willing to be wrong, willing to understand that your way isn't the only way, or this way isn't the only way. That life is lived not in a linear path, but multi-level path.
Mhm.
But I think that people who only believe that this is the only way to do life, um, they shortchange themselves. Um, I truly do believe that they shortchange themselves into living a full, fulfilling life. But who am I to say that they shortchange themselves? Maybe for them, living a fulfilled life is this way. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But I know, like, if the other rule that I just made for myself as of recent, probably in the last since the pandemic, if you have never left your home state or your county or your city that you lived in to live somewhere else, I
Mhm.
don't want to have a conversation with you. Why? Because your only way of understanding is through the line that you were raised in. Maybe not even have a conversation with you. I don't want to argue about world events, or I don't want to talk to you about other states when you've never left yours, when you
Mhm.
have never left your home like county to go
Right.
live life. So it's like those people who have traveled and are well versed in other cultures, or those tend to be the more interesting conversations. Again, interesting isn't always good or bad, but it just tend to be more interesting conversations. So
Like you're saying, casual conversations are just
Right.
like on
Like
hot
it's
topics.
right. Like hot top, like hot topics or anything. It's like people who only listen to one genre of music. I can't discuss music with you
Mm,
because it's like you only know one way to hear music. It's like not good or bad. It's just you only know one way to hear music. And if I want to talk about country music, you there's no reference point for us to connect. So we're just gonna have to talk about this type of music, right? So conversations become really linear when you only know one way to live life. Um, but I think the Western way of thought is that our way is better than your way, so assimilate to us or you're just wrong. Even when it comes down to the biblical context, the way that the West understands religion or they understand the Bible or they have learned about the Bible or religion is a very one way of of thought. So it's difficult to have a full grasp of something when you only have one way to look at it.
right,
Or
right.
when you have only one way do you want to look at it? So I
And
was like, okay, cool.
I guess that's something I kind of find myself questioning whether to speak on something or not, because it's like when I can hear something maybe in a vacuum or like watch a conversation being had, it's easy to like point out all the things that they're saying wrong, or if it's if you're talking about doctrine or theory, or where someone's like claiming something, and like you're kind of pointing to like Ruth earlier and Boaz, it's like, okay, well, if you go within the context, like here are the holes in the story, or here's like the bigger picture you might be missing. But then on the other hand, it's like, am I going to take the time and engage in that conversation with somebody? And it's like, am I going to remember and recall things as well as they are? But it's like a non-starter in a way, to where it's like, like, why even bother? And then on the other hand, it's like it's easier to sit back and play like the what do they call it, Monday morning quarterback, where it's
Yeah,
like, well, I would have done, and it's like, okay, well, here's your chance, like
right. Yeah,
step up and do it. And it's that, um I guess in one way it's almost like, if you never have any opinions, or if you're just worried about never offending anybody, you can kind of just like go on in your merry way. But a lot of people seeking attention and wanting to be noticed is that they take chances and they quote unquote dare to be great. And then it's like, if they fall flat on their face, or people are like, oh, to hell with you. And in
right,
some cases, it's like when people talk about someone going very wrong, or it's like you did wrong by a lot of people. Like, people don't take too kindly to that, to where it's like, oh, okay, like you just came in, stole a bunch of money, and or you came in and like violated people. It's like, yeah, it's not going to sit real well.
right. So even to that though, man, like there's some opinions that I have
Mhm.
about certain things, and I will vocalize those opinions, whether they're popular opinions or non-popular opinions. But I always caveat out, say, hey, but these are mine. These are
Right.
opinions. Nobody has to agree or disagree. These are just my opinions. And if you like them, great. I use them for what they hear me for where I'm coming from, not for what you thought or think that I should be coming from.
Yeah.
And I also realize that even doctrine is very subjective. And I'll even touch on this, like biblical doctrine is very subjective. Is it really? But we all read the same Bible. Well, yeah, that's why we got so many denominations. Oh my gosh, you know what I'm saying? Like every denomination, and like I'm being overly obnoxious just because it's like that's how it sounds like when somebody's like oh well the biblical doctrine doesn't ever change. It's like, are you sure though? Because it sounds like you've never opened your eyes enough to see that there's many denominations that have their own doctrine,
Mhm.
loosely based off the Bible, but sounds like it's very controlling. Okay, cool. Like the biblical guidance is a is a guide, not a doctrine. And so it's like when you create doctrine around one thing, but this one thing pushes your agenda forward or pushes your ideal life forward,
Mhm.
then it's like then that's what you're gonna go with.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
even something to that regard, like something I've been trying to do over the past year or so is like hearing how the Bible is written to an Eastern audience, like in an Eastern perspective, and seeing like, okay, here's how they see something like numbers, and here's how like people talk about like the red letters of Jesus, like, okay, these were the exact words of Jesus, but it's like sometimes there's what you get on the surface, but then there's what you go going deeper into the culture, and you look at, okay, there have been people that have been studying this for thousands, if not like, I don't know if it'd be like 5,000 years plus from like the time that the early books were written, like
mhm,
the Genesis, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Exodus. And it's like um, having an understanding that, okay, when you have Jesus walking around and doing his ministry, it's like he's referring back to things in the Old Testament. But like if you didn't have the Old Testament to be like, oh, this sounds nice, just be good to your neighbor. If you get slapped on this side, go to this side. But then actually reading along with someone that's saying like, read it, like how is someone going to slap you on your right cheek? It's like the only way someone would slap you on your right cheek, and for you to offer, or no, I think it's the left. If they slap you here, let offer this side, because it's like for someone to hit you, they would have to hit you with their right hand, and
right,
for the right hand to hit the right side, I keep pointing to the wrong side. But if you have the same hand hitting the same side of the face, it's the only way that that could happen is a backhand. And if someone's just out gonna backhand you in public, that's like, you know, like present day, you'd say that someone just bitch slapped you. And it's
right.
like, that's not just gonna be like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna be here, just just
Right
do
here,
it.
sir.
But
Just
it
go ahead and finish me off, sir. It's
right,
like,
right. But it's like having it written within that context and actually seeing it. It's like, oh no, this is like this is making a bigger point, not to just be like, oh, just have yourself walked over. It's like, no, if somebody goes to the extent to embarrass you in this way, it's like make a scene of it to be like, okay, here's how much this person is wronging me, and seeing like where that thought process comes from. I'm like, it's not that this stuff for me personally was hidden, or I need to go tell a whole bunch of people this is what you need, because like we kind of say, like some people don't want your new thing. And it's
right,
like I could be hot today and then tomorrow I could be like, I don't want to be bothered. But just kind of going through the exercise of going through the process of listening, but then also thinking, hey, I should share this with one other person, or just be like, is it just me, or like are there Christian influencers in the same way that there are other influencers, and like everyone's like, we're not like them, or like, but it's like we're kind of doing the same thing. And it's like, okay, it's not, I'm not going crazy alone. Like we're all seeing the same stuff. Like some people will have like a whole system built up where it's like, yeah, this guy's got no clothes on, but we just kind of go with it. You got people over here saying they're healing this person, they're healing that. Not to say that miracles don't happen, but
right,
the way they go about it, and it's like, oh, like this person does it, and that person does it, and that person does it. So it's like, I I wouldn't blame someone for not believing in the good word, so to speak, especially if they've seen so much like foolishness. But
right,
it's one of those where it's like, okay, well, um, what was the point I was getting at? It's like just because something's happening somewhere or to someone, it doesn't give me the pass, so to speak, to just be like, ah, don't worry about it, just do whatever. Because like in some ways, it's like if I always feel like I've got a guilty conscience, or somebody will say something, it's like, oh, like I better go do something, otherwise I'm going to go to hell. But then
right,
it's in doing the research and learning, not out of like fear of compulsion, but out of like curiosity and actually wanting to know. It's like, I'm learning more within like this period of time, and I don't feel like I've got to go out of my way to bash people, but at the same time, I don't have to just sit there and like listen to whatever anybody wants to say. It's like, hey, this is the new agenda or whatnot. Like everybody doesn't necessarily need to know my opinion, but it's like if I'm met with something I don't agree with, I can just be like, no, I don't want that and just move on from there. It doesn't need to be like, this is my new crusade or this is my flag that I'm putting on. This is my cape for the day, so to speak.
But so it that's actually pretty interesting. Um, because I think when when I hear you talking, I'm reflecting back on what you grow up learning historically, and you're like, you know, democracy is great. Yeah, it's great when the system that democracy is in is created to make democracy great.
Mhm.
But democracy isn't always great when you try to institute it in a place that it doesn't apply to, or that it that system is created to nurture that democracy.
Yeah.
Like it's only great in a place that it can actually flourish. But when you try to impose it on somebody else's life that is in a system that isn't created to hold democracy, it becomes actually toxic, right? And so it's like I remember being overseas and being perplexed almost like, well, what's wrong with these people? They not want democracy? Do they not want the American way of life? It's like, no, the American way of life works in America in a system that was created to maintain that way of life. It
Mhm.
doesn't work in any other country but America. And in America, subjectively, kind of barely works. Anyway, that's just a whole different topic. So all that to say is like we would love to think that this beautiful thing, this great thing that is present, that that people have taken time to really break down and learn, is a great thing until we go back to the context that it's in. It's like, oh, even like the whole slap and turn your cheek. It's like when you read it, it's like, oh, such a profound thing. It's like actually what he's saying is like historically, like when you go back and read the law, like that applies to that. He he's actually mocking because it's like you could only slap a man one way. You can't backhand anybody. Like backhanding someone is actually a bigger crime. So like when he says slapping, he's saying like, yeah, when somebody slaps, turn your other cheek because them trying to slap you again is actually going to again look terrible on him and look like it's like reading the law that pertains to that
Mhm.
will say, "Oh, Jesus was really trolling people." Like it's like
I,
it's like naturally, like if you put it into today's context, yeah, he was really trolling folk. But
I'll
it's
get back to you. I guess some things I guess I still have my knee jerk reaction to be like, okay, hold up. At least you didn't do like one guy. It's like but I guess that's the other thing where it's like I didn't mean to cut off your point,
You're
but
good.
I kind of did. But it's like it's one of those things where um like obviously we're doing a podcast and you watch podcast clips of people where it's like, oh, this person sounds genuine in this, and then you like cut to um this other guy. He was like in churches being like, oh, we don't glorify strippers, but I only glorify the one stripper. And it's like, wait, what? And he's calling Jesus a stripper for being stripped on the cross. And it's like, that's not the same
It's like it's
thing.
not the same thing. It's
But
like
it's like you just got people out there just like yelling and cheering. It's like they're excited to be in the building. Maybe the music is playing loud. Nobody's really thinking about like,
that, like the full on context of
right, right,
it.
right. And even like the like hearing people describe what crucifixion is and like hearing like I don't think I'd ever actually looked up what a Roman crucifixion was and like who was allowed to do it and like how how intense they got into doing that, or I mean like how intense the whole process was. But sometimes it's like um the first time I heard it was kind of this thing where it's like the lullaby effect. It's like you get so used to like reading something over and over and over, you don't
Right.
really think about like
Like the
what's
depth
that?
of it.
Right. It's like what's going on there? Like you're going to and like I said, I haven't looked at what all involves in crucifixion, but it's something pretty brutal where like
Right.
you're stripped naked, beaten to within an inch of your life. I'm pretty sure you get your legs broken and different things like that. So it's not just like a casual Friday night. You're just going out for an outing. Oh, we're just gonna go watch the crucifixion. It's like, no, like they perfected a way to kill people very, very effectively. And like I feel like I'm kind of going in a roundabout way, but kind of seeing things like that where on the one hand you can see like you're not going to know everything about someone just from watching an interaction with them, but being able to see two ends of something where you can have someone that's either like a false prophet or someone that's very charismatic. They say words that lay on real nice, like butter. And it's like, oh, and I had this deep thought or this profound thing. And it's like, if I say the controversial thing, it gets people engaging.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, like, you don't want to be a lover of money, but you don't want to be broke. And like, you kind of spin this word salad that whoever it connects with,
Right. That's
maybe
the
it,
connect.
it maybe it betters people's lives, but at least the what would you say? There's something that there's something to be learned from people that are successful in what they do. If I want to learn from them, but on the other hand, it's like it doesn't make it not true that they can also do something bad. But if I just choose to be like, well, there's nothing to learn here. The reason my life is just terrible is because, oh, all the evil people over there just took what I needed. It's like, that's not the whole story.
No, like like even that though, it's like when I guess the inability to take responsibility for yourself,
That part. Yeah.
like it kind of negates the like even the whole conversation anybody can have about, oh, I felt manipulated when somebody said X and Y and Z, or I watched this clip and I can't believe that person said that. It's like, oh well, you watched the clip. Did you watch the whole entire conversation? No, just from that clip. I can't. It's like, oh, okay, then you're easily swayed by somebody's words or by somebody's actions that you have no context of. Um, but I do believe that we as people genuinely hear what aligns with us and what makes us feel better than other people.
I would agree with
Like
that.
if somebody said, well, you know, those who follow this podcast are better than anybody else who don't listen to it. It's like there's going to be that, oh yeah, of course, yeah. But
I'm in
there's
the in crowd.
right, but like it makes us go to sleep better at night. Those who align with this party versus that party, that this way of understanding the faith versus this way of understanding the faith. Yeah, everybody wants to go to heaven, but not everybody believes that everybody's gonna make it because they want to feel better than like I am better than you because I abide the law by doing X, Y, and Z. Um, and okay, cool. Do you go to sleep at night better? Yes. Okay. All right then. I also go to sleep at night better knowing that I'm doing what is right for my spirit, what is right that I'm being directed to, that, is like you weren't in the room when me and God were having that conversation. So I go to sleep better knowing that I'm following a specific path that I've been put on. And for you to say, well, I am wrong because I don't follow X, Y, and Z is okay. If that's how you go to sleep at night, bro. Like, okay, cool. Um, but I also know that that way of thought is looked at like, oh well, you don't stand for the faith. It's like I do. You just I don't stand where you stand. Oh, okay. I'm also allowed to stand on my heel too. I don't have to stand on your heel. Um, and we're also allowed to look at the same thing and say like, okay, cool. Like, um, that again goes back to romanticizing a certain way of life. It's like when Jesus said like, hey, leave everything behind and follow me. That's cool. It sounds great, and until you do it,
Mm.
and it's like, well, what does that look like? That looks like being an outcast, but I don't know how many people are willing to be an outcast for the sake of their faith. Um, when we talk about martyrdom, like yeah, everybody wants to follow Christ until it's. I always say like, it's like everybody thinks they can do it until the rooster crows, and I'm always like, maybe your rooster hasn't crowed yet, bro. Um, Peter was really adamant about that. It's like the man who literally saw everything happen and knew the truth about what was happening denied Christ, like when his rooster crowed.
But I think that could be said about anybody because
Oh,
it's like
right,
because that's not where the story stops, and
right.
it's one
That's
of
not
those
where the
things
story
where it's
stops.
like he's still some one of the three that's counted on to be brought back, and even writing. I think he wrote Revelation. No, it's John. But
Right,
it's like
but
even under my bad. I think I cut you off again.
no. I was just saying that to say that it's like the first part gets romanticized as I'll do anything to do for X and Y and Z. Um, until you have to take ownership of what you're saying that you would have to do. And I
Right,
think
right,
there's something to be said about, like a follow-on story of what then happened. But it's like we all want to be that person that can stand 10 toes down, but not the person that maybe rethinks their 10 toes down point and
hmm
then comes back and says, hey, listen, I spoke way out of turn because I thought that was going to be easy. And
yeah,
I thought that was going to be how it is. But I realize now that that's not how it is. So let me, you know, redeem myself by actually understanding fully what that takes and then taking that on. Um, and that's where the romanticizing of scripture sometimes comes into play and romanticizing a life lived a certain way. It's like no. It's like maybe you haven't got the full understanding of what that takes. Maybe you haven't seen or felt a level of pain that would get you to that point. And I'm using the rooster crowing as as in like you say you would never do X and Y and Z because you have never been pushed to that point.
right. That makes sense.
You know,
Yeah,
it,
you had a great. That is a great analogy.
it's like
I just
you
jumped in there a little prematurely. Just like
just
I mean, no, the rooster crowed on time. I was just trying to beat the roosters to the punch, I guess. But it's one of those things where it's like, every time I listen to that podcast, it's one of the things they always say is that you need to reach out to other people to like have discussion groups in person or like engage with other people because otherwise it's like um not engaging with other people in conversation. It leads me by default to maybe insert just, hey, here's some random facts I just learned. And it's like, I just got to throw them here and throw them there. And it's like, you don't have to like step over somebody to make a point you found
right,
out about. It's like, yeah, you can have your point too, but like, it's got to come in its time.
right. Pause that real quick because I gotta go use the bathroom
Gotcha.
because I drank too much coffee and water.
It, sometimes I think to myself, you got to stop feeling bad about the things you don't know and just kind of like learn a little bit at a time. And heck, if you don't know something, you just don't know it. Like you can't be a knower of all things.
Right,
I kept wanting to say jack of all trades, but it's like no, switch it up. Maybe it means the same thing, but it's like cooking might not be the strong suit today, but maybe I'll swing by Costco or something. It's completely unrelated to what we were just talking about, but
But it's a great point nonetheless.
yeah.
It's a great point nonetheless. And
But
and
it's like it's been a minute since I've gone by there, got a piece of salmon. I keep wanting to say salmon, but
you will
but
get canceled immediately. You hear me? Immediately.
but
Please
it's like
pronounce
doing
L.
that and breaking it up into like four meals or something like that. It's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I can do that from time to time. So it's like a good cooked piece of fish would be good because I think I had uncooked salmon the other day and that is part of sushi. It was on a sushi roll.
Okay.
And some of them tasted all right, the others not so good, but it's all right.
You know, I realize that the sushi is not for everybody. It's not for me, not all of
Mm,
it. Um, and there are some people who find a specific sushi. Living in Hawaii taught me this.
mm,
When you grow up eating poi, and when you grow up eating, raw seasoned fish, it becomes a part of your daily desire or want, a part of your palate. Now, if you're a foreigner and you try this, to my perspective, extreme way of eating,
mhm.
you're going to have a response to it that isn't natural to to them. I once partook in this ritual of eating well seasoned, well marinated raw fish.
Oh, is that the word for it? Poi?
Poi, yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Okay. Because when you said it at first, I was like, what's that?
and I realized quickly that my palate, their brother in Christ, my palate was my
I
my,
guess
my
we'll allow it since we believe the same things. So
my
yeah.
my palate was not of good use, and my face did not hide the fact that my palate didn't like this thing that everybody else seemed to be very fond of,
Mm,
and I felt guilty for my face making a face that I that I didn't know was contorted,
mm.
because the minute that seasoned meat touched my tongue and the texture didn't align in my head with what I thought it was going to be like, I ate it. But that was the only thing that I ate it because it was on my plate.
Yeah.
But that was the only thing I didn't want to be rude. I heard, it is rude. But so I literally, like, that was a very quick lesson in you don't have to do what is customary, but you also don't have to be rude.
Mm,
Um, and I learned that in a very practical way. Sometimes we do read things like, oh, hey, cultural assimilation. When you go to a country or a place that you don't, it's rude to refuse their food. And you're like, well, how could somebody refuse something that looks so delicious? Well, until you taste it and you realize that, hey, this is not what I'm used to. You don't have to be rude, yes, but you can
mm.
still manage to not partake of that dish. And so, like, I learned quickly that raw fish is not my thing. Um, the same way that we were talking about certain ways of living, you can partake of something, and realize quickly that it's not your way of understanding, and go back to how you understand something, because your current palate isn't well, isn't within a system that that nurtures that taste. When people grow up in a culture that has a specific taste, you jumping into it, you already don't have a system that nurtures what their taste is. So it's like, okay, cool, like, that's okay. I think being an adult now, has also okayed me to say, I don't like that. I can say, I don't want to eat that.
Yeah.
And I'm justified. I don't have to go back to my, my upbringing that says you have to eat everything on your plate. No, I don't. You're
Mm.
right. I do not, and I will not. And saying no and knowing what I have a taste for is has saved my life a lot. But to your point, I don't think we're all cut out for certain conversations, certain belief systems, certain ways of thought. But if it works for you because your system can nurture that way of thought, okay, pass it on, pass it to your kids. But that's not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said for like being able to have conversation on different topics with multiple perspective, or being able to have like a bigger conversation where it's like, okay, there's different approaches you can take, like we were talking about the math problem, to get to the same answer. And so long as it's not like way off the beaten path, because obviously you'll have different people choose what's like, we kind of do things by default, how
Mhm.
it's convenient. Like being at school or being in the military, for instance, it's like you learn certain ways, like this is how you go about it. And sometimes it's like you just got to get through the thing.
Mhm.
And this isn't really a place where your opinion, your feelings, or your um like your way comes into it. It's like you just you kind of
You
do
got to get
things.
a bone bare basics of something.
Yeah, it's like you do things how you're told exactly. But like now that you're we're out of that system, so to speak, it's that it's up to you to take some of what you've learned before and apply it to what applies to you now.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's for me it's okay to do that. And I wouldn't say that there's no wrong answers, because it's almost one of these things where it's like, oh, everything's okay now. It's like you have more opportunities to learn,
Mhm.
not necessarily just mess up, but like, yeah, you will mess up where you don't get something done the right way the first time, or you don't just get it right. It's like it's gonna go wrong or it's gonna go bad. And like knowing that it's not a all or nothing. Like you messed up, that's it. We just throw you in the messed up
Right.
corner. You go
Got a
over
death
there,
sentence. Yeah.
put that dunce cap on, and just wear it for life. But like seeing that, okay, when it comes back to like the Christianity angle, I guess I'd never paid attention to it before, or like understood that yes, you do have like the zealots, you do have the keepers of the law, you do have the ones that kind of like, okay, we're going to assimilate, and the ones that are like, we're going to segregate, we're going to do our own thing over here, we're going to follow what's being done, and we're going to preserve the text, we're going to preserve this. And it's like each one of those um, approaches has brought something to help. But then when it comes to the minute things where it's like, I don't know if you call it like first world problems, or like Karen derangement syndromes, where it's like you don't have enough problems going on at home, or you do have problems, but instead of dealing it with yourself, you kind of
You
project
go, yeah.
your feelings onto
You
other
go create
people.
more. Yeah.
Right, right. So it's
Yeah.
like other people's problems, or if you're able to solve someone else's problems, it makes you feel more empowered and
Yeah.
emboldened. And it's not to say like, yeah, you can feel empowered and emboldened, and some people go like, the more discipline you apply to yourself, the better you feel, or the more intellectually superior, like you studied this, you like put your time and attention into something, and it's like, okay, that either becomes your new identity, or that becomes like your golden star. Like you did this thing right. Okay, I got it. Like now I'm verified. But it's like one of those things where it's like whatever works for the time, when you get to the point where it doesn't work, or when you get challenged on something, having the ability to like change your mind, or not be stuck in like, okay, if the ship is going down, I'm going down with it. Like whichever whichever choice you make is like you're afforded to do that because you got free will or just because hey, pick and choose. Like it can be all or nothing, or it can just be like, okay, this is just another day in the life of, and it's not always a zero sum game. I hope that makes a little
You know,
bit of sense.
yeah, like I at least to me, it's not, man. I don't want to say this, but it's like nothing is ever that serious that it's all or nothing. Um, and I say ever because I'm also taking into context that I live in a first world. But coming from a third world, quote unquote,
Hmm.
nothing is ever that serious to where you do X and Y and Z for the for like as the end all be all. It could, there's a level of severity to certain things,
Hmm.
but most of the things can be resolved. Um, if everybody desires the same outcome, but it ain't ever that deep. Honestly,
Right.
nothing. It's not a life or death situation. Most things in life are not life or death. Most things are egocentric, and most things are like it has to go my way or it has to go this way. And I was reading about the unenforceable rule um, when your your shoulds or no where your desires and wants now become shoulds,
Mm.
um, and it's like once that happens, now you're trying to impose your will on a rule that you can't change. Just because I give you something, you're not obligated to give me something back. But the minute that I start to feel that you also owe me something because I gave you something,
Mm.
now I start to go into a place of um, ego, but also a place of my way is the only way that matters. And anytime we start to impose unenforceable rules on people or the world, we create more chaos and crisis than what we should have or what we would have if we didn't. So it's like,
Right.
no, I would love to think that I see things for what they are, even in my own bias. But I also know that I got a bias that I
Mm.
see things through, and it's not always going to be perfect or it's not always going to be one way. But I also know that my bias works for me, and
Right.
I'm very aware of that. So I don't take anything. I don't take 99.9% of things in life personally
Mm.
because I know that I'm looking at it through my own lens. And man, life has truly shifted and been great because of that. So it's like, okay, like it's like, oh, all right, whatever. Um, but it's not like now I also just let things happen and just just roll off my shoulder. Like I still take into to consideration things like that, but it's never that deep.
Right.
I, yeah.
That's a good point.
So I don't know if you want to end it there or not, but
Yeah.
like,
I mean, that sounds like a good, that sounds like a good enough place to end it. I don't think I could have said it as any better myself, but appreciate you taking some time and it's always good to catch up in the new year.
in the random nonsense of the world, man, like I enjoy our conversations because I never know where they're gonna end up at
Yeah.
or where they're gonna start. But I think that's a beautiful thing about being able to have genuine conversations that don't have to be that deep, but also are that deep. But they're also really authentic, and it's not like something like let me write my notes and share it with Asher. It's like no, it's like hey, you call, I pick up, we chat.
Yeah.
That's literally as deep as it gets.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's like maybe that's why I was kind of pointing to the hysteria thing because on the one hand, I'm like, I'm kind of glad I get to be on the outside looking in, and it's nothing that's how would you say, deep enough to where you kind of fall into it and this has to be, I have to have a position, I have to do a thing. But on the on the main side, I would say it's trying to fit into a community, feel like, okay, I have a reason for being here. Like I work here, live here, have family here. Like if something is to happen today, like happened last year and the years before, like hurricane comes through, car breaks down, or health issue, just like simple things, even if you want to be able to go do something, but your phone dies or you lost your phone, like, is there anyone you can reach out to? Or can you do that for anyone? It's like in small times like that, or if you're trying to pay for something, but you don't have it. And just kind of thinking it's like, okay, if I if I don't feel comfortable calling on someone during these times, I'm like, okay, I don't have to feel like a terrible person, but if that's something I don't want to happen again, or I don't want to just be like, man, woe is me, life sucks. Let me get on the treadmill of like, or get on the path, not necessarily treadmill, but let me start doing something about this if it's going to bother me. Like, let me go make a new, let me go make a new friend. Let me get around someone that's going to um, help me enjoy parts of the life I'd like to see and not just be like, crap, here again.
Right. No, I get it. I get it. I get it. And I'm glad that you're in that place where you can just pick up the phone and call and
Yeah.
not feel like, oh no, what if nobody answers? Like,
Because I mean, otherwise it's like, of course, it's sort of going to end it, but I'm going to drag it on just a little bit longer. But it's like a simple thing of if you live in an apartment complex and like you move around for 10 plus years, and it's one of those things, unless I go out of my way quickly to make friends, I can quickly realize within a month's time, it's like, I don't know anybody that lives here. Like, and I guess that could go for anybody. Like you don't know any of your neighbors. So like if you just disappear like that, watching a lot of these true crime things and things like that, it's like if you don't check in with your family, or if you don't have family or friends to check in with, it's like you kind of just disappear and nobody would be the wiser unless they're like, there's a smell coming from over there, or like what's going on, or like this person didn't report to work, but let's go do a welfare check. It's
right.
like
Yeah.
just those small things that are like, oh yeah, I guess that is important. It's one of those good reminders to be like, okay, like I can do something about it, or just kind of like binge watch the horrors and just be like, oh man, I'm just gonna hide under my bed and feel good. But it's always fun to chat with you, Theo.
Always, 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 man. We got to talk about the Lion King next time.
I feel
Not a
like
big,
we is there
I'm not a
some
big fan of the new movie that came out.
oh, they did come out with a new
It's like a live animation. Not a big fan. Not a big fan of the new Mufasa movie, but
okay.
we'll talk about it next time.
You always got to make time for the Lion King.
Got to. Important life lessons.